On Simchat Torah morning, after we parade with the Torah scrolls, we gather around to read the very last words of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. The man who could hardly speak departs with an original song, his words, not God's. And his last sentence in life begins, Ashrecha Yisrael, mi chamocha. Happy are you, O Israel. Fortunate are you, O Jewish people, who is like you. Ashrecha Yisrael. You might recognize the word Ashrei. Fortunate are you, O Jewish people. What must it have been like for Moshe to make these his final words? Moshe, who was born at a time and place when it was against the law for him to live, whose first recorded words were, "Why are you beating your neighbor?" Who faced down Pharaoh, led his people into freedom, brought them to Mount Sinai. All the desert crises of food and faith Moshe had gone through with them. After all that, Moshe sees his people endure, finally get their act together, and now they are sitting still one last time, knowing that what's just ahead for them is a future and a fight. Moshe sings, Ashrecha Yisrael, fortunate are you, O Israel, mi chamocha, there is no people quite like you. Last Simchat Torah, October 8th, knowing what we knew, we had to decide how we would sing those words. Should we just hurry through and get out of here? And what about our children? Most years, our kid-friendly Simchat Torah is a quick early evening on a school day. But last year it was a Sunday morning with no rush, so we had bigger plans. Would parents even bring their kids on October 8th, knowing what we knew? We decided to stick with our plan. With our broken hearts and overwhelmed, we would dance with the Torah for our kids, and for Israelis who are already begging us not to let anyone reach across the ocean and take this too away. Amazingly, parents brought their kids, and after dancing right down there in this aisle, we rolled out the Torah on a table all the way to the back. As the kids were gathered next to the Torah, I got to the chanting of Moshe's final sentence, Ashrecha Yisrael, fortunate are you, O Israel. I so wanted to sing it, to promise it to our kids, as Moshe promised the generation he was about to launch. I was overcome with tears, and only thanks to the kids could I sing these words at all. As hard as it was to sing Ashrecha Yisrael, Moshe's final sentence has more words. I don't emphasize them generally because they're not as inspirational. Am noshab Adonai, magen ezrecha, asher cherev ga'avatecha. Fortunate are you, O Israel, who is like you, a nation saved by the divine, your helping shield, whose sword is your pride. Your enemies shall recant themselves to you, and you on their high places will tread. But as I croaked out those words, too, I had this terrible thought. Not a single part of this Torah verse was true. Not fortunate, not saved, no helping shield, an enemy far from recanting, far from going back on its essence, and who was treading on whom that day? Was the Torah itself being kidnapped and used to mock us? How could we go just minutes later and begin the Torah again, and with rockets in the sky declare that God created the heavens, and that in the deepest darkness God said, "Let there be light"? Yet with all the unrelenting loss and pain of the past exhausting year, and even with the escalations of war this past weeks, and the attack from Iran these past days, I say to you that the critical spiritual thing for us in this new year is to get back to Moshe's final words, Ashrecha Yisrael, mi chamocha. Fortunate are you, O Jewish people, who is like you. We need to believe that this is as true as ever, and true even as never before. Our future here depends on it. Obviously, atrocities and war are in no way fortunate. And I do not mean it is easy to be Jewish just this moment, only that we are profoundly fortunate to be the Jews of this moment, of this era in Jewish history. Now, believe me, part of me wonders if I'm crazy to say this today. I really just want to reach out and envelop you all in a hug, allow us to cry together among people who know the many layers of our weeping. Our congregation has many Israelis, and we are closely connected to several families who have lost people on or after October 7th, and to at least 5 people who were taken hostage. Last fall, 2 Beth Abraham families had their Israeli kids here in town taking refuge. We have college students, too. My own daughter is a student at Barnard College of Columbia University, so we know painfully what it's like for a child to live within an institution and a community ripped apart over the past year. Some of our tears are for the loss of dreams, for peace, delayed at least for now. Yet I keep coming back to this thought. We need Ashrecha Yisrael, Mi Chamocha. Fortunate we are to be this unique Jewish generation, the Jews of America of our era. We need to say those words to ourselves. We need to carry ourselves that way outwardly in the world. I thought about talking today about any of the particular things on people's minds right now, the immediate war itself, or questions about our relationships with other people here in America and anti-Semitism around us, or concerns about the ethics of the military actions we are connected to, or about Israeli policy toward Palestinians. But before we can talk about or work on any of these, we have to think first about seeing ourselves once again in the light of Ashrecha Yisrael Mi Chamocha. Look what we have built so far. In less than 150 years, Jews have gone from a tiny presence in the United States, having gotten here in flight just like from every other place we have been in exile, to a flourishing community. Here we have not just carved out a corner for ourselves for a while. We have been essential to making our host country into a home for us and for everyone. From Justice Brandeis to Justice Kagan, American law has been infused with our commitment to law and justice. From Philip Roth to Dara Horn, American literature has been infused with our creativity and our concerns. Healing, science, comedy. The equality and freedom of people is infused with our ideas and achieved partly with our legwork. The best of America's story and the best of the American Jewish story are completely intertwined. Yehuda Kurtzer of the Shalom Hartman Institute said this summer that even though we have always been a small percentage of the population, the bigness of America drew out the bigness of Judaism. In this year's election, the candidates are a former president whose daughter is a committed Jew and a sitting vice president whose husband is a committed Jew. There has never been a diaspora Jewish community like this in all of Jewish history. That litany used to be my Ashrecha Yisrael. But in March, Franklin Foer wrote an article in The Atlantic called "The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending." His main evidence is the year at many universities, the turning against many Jews, as well against these aspects of America that Jews have helped build by many people who will be tomorrow's American leaders. Foer argues that the conditions that made us happy and fortunate here seem to be going away. Well, he is right that the conditions are not the same, but that is not the determining story. In the past, in other places, it might have been. But there are new seeds of new strengths we have, and they too have been uniquely visible, actually, in this past year. I'm just going to talk about a couple. Many of us experienced the year through the words and leadership of the Goldberg Polans in Jerusalem, Rachel and John, parents of Hirsch, Zichrono Livracha. Hirsch was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival after saving some lives in the attack, and his parents have urged us to advocate for their son and all the hostages every single day in every way possible. His murder a month ago, along with 5 others, was crushing. But how John and Rachel have advocated is so dramatically different from what Jews like us have been used to. They hardly talk about Hamas. Even in their eulogies for Hirsch, they didn't name the group. They talk about us and what it means to value and rejoice in human life. In July, the Goldberg Polans and their close circle decided that alongside their political advocacy, it was important to spend a week flooding the world with Torah and mitzvot. So they organized a study of the whole Hebrew Bible around the clock and around the world, and a concluding international study event. They dedicated a new Torah scroll. They organized an evening of song and music at Tachana Rishonah, a hip outdoor venue in Jerusalem. They declared 2 days of service, invited people to make food packages in Jerusalem, And if you weren't nearby to post on their webpage acts of chesed you would be doing all week anywhere. Right away, you could see some 200 things, from challah making to opening up one's swimming pool, to cultivating patience, to driving Palestinian children to and from medical appointments in Israel. It was like they were forcing the world to come into this world and forcing us all to force it, even at a time like this. The Goldberg Polans speak and act in this personal and international crisis as though the primary center of our destiny is in our own hands and in the hands of any Jew with power. Of course, there is a context, but for John and Rachel, even hardcore advocacy for the hostages is about what is inside us, no matter the context. All year, every day, they have used the language of this season, teshuvah, accountability, and forgiveness. At Hirsch's funeral, they begged his forgiveness for what they did not do to save his life, though what more could they have possibly done? They have asked us directly, as they have asked themselves over and over, what have you not done yet? Who are you? They have asked world leaders and Israeli leaders and all of us Jews and all Americans. They described Hirsch at his gravesite as someone who forced them to open their eyes and their hearts wider than they had known how to. In the past, even in the Golden Age, at difficult times, we would mainly point our fingers outward. The Goldberg Polans showed us that we as Jews are strong enough to make ourselves the moral center of any story, even the most difficult story, even one where other people are also wrong and are wronging us. To have leaders and teachers like this in the Jewish crisis of a generation, Ashrecha Yisrael, how fortunate we are. That we have become a Jewish people strong enough at a time like this to respond to John and Rachel, to ground ourselves in both advocacy and mitzvah at the same time, to ask something both from the world and from ourselves. Ashrecha Yisrael mi chamocha. This is what Zionism was supposed to do. In an era of Jewish self-determination, we take responsibility on ourselves as makers of history, even though we are small. It's only in this generation that we are starting to learn how to do that. For the first time, our bigger response to difficulties has been much more than never again. Some would say, like Franklin Foer, that this year the strains between Jews and our allies finally broke. But I saw something different up close here in southern New Hampshire, specifically with my colleagues in the clergy. My mission for 16 years in the Nashua Area Interfaith Council has been to press beyond the simple sentiment of there are many roads to God, so that when push comes to shove, we'll know whether we are really there for each other. This year was a big test. In October, when I heard from almost none of my cherished colleagues, I began to write them, to tell them what it was like to be a Jew now, and also my worries about what would happen to Judaism if they gave us reason to close in on ourselves. Each one of them responded. I had been president of that group for almost a third of my time in Nashua, and I was disoriented for a while. At first, I just asked them to listen to me and to pray for us, for the people we're connected to, as they were praying for the Palestinian people their churches are connected to. They all said yes, of course. I said at a meeting last fall that I think the biggest difference between me and most of them is not Jesus, but Zionism. A few days later, one of my colleagues reached out to ask me what I meant. And this opened up an amazing conversation about our seminaries and what we each know about the Holy Land. I bought about 25 copies of Yossi Klein Halevi's Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor, which includes Palestinian responses back, and I've given it to many colleagues. They have read it. Some have shared it in their congregations. Some have opened up to me about their reflections about the role the Christian world has played in pitting Jews and Muslims against each other. Most of our Christian friends have brought more nuance to their words and their discussions in church about Israel-Palestine. I have done this work not from supplication, but from strength, from a foundation many of you have built over decades in Nashua, and immodestly I will say I myself have built. Ashrecha Yisrael. It is fortunate right now to be a Jew in the interfaith community of Greater Nashua. And it is good for us to be in the middle of difficult moral conversations that serious people are having. There are conversations that are not serious, but there are many serious ones. Because I pushed to see if my colleagues and I could talk this way, I could open my ears more too. So I also can and must say that we here are connected to at least one Palestinian family in New Hampshire who lost many people in Gaza very early in the war. It is not easy at all, but we can handle it. We are maturing as a Jewish community within America. Our friendships, alliances, and our power are still robust, even though the conditions don't make it as easy. Ashrecha Yisrael, mi chamocha. We are a unique generation. And part of Ashrecha Yisrael is simply us here, now, doing what we do, here sustaining each other, singing and thinking and crying together, gathering as a moral community. Not because we have to, not because it's as joyful as other years, but because this is who we are. So Simchat Torah will be different this year, no question. We will have to honor what happened last year, but at some point we will dance, and we will finally arrive again at Moshe's last sentence. And we will have a choice, all of us, whether what grips you most right now is anger or sadness or fear about the fighting, or the broader future of Jews and anti-Semitism, or the ethics of the conflicts. We are all like Moshe, looking out at a future that has both purpose and war. We can say that things for Jews in America are going to be like they have been everywhere else for us in exile, and then that will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or we can say, Ashrecha Yisrael, mi chamocha. We are fortunate to be the Jews of this era, whose future is not determined, who have the possibility through our choices and efforts to define who we are and rise to the occasion like no other generation of Jews has ever before. When Moshe composed his final words, he reached back to the first song he taught the people along with his sister Miriam. You might know the words Mi Chamocha from the prayers, and it got there from the Torah's Song of the Crossing of the Sea, Shirat Hayam. Back then, Miriam and Moshe asked us to look to the heavens and say, Mi chamocha ba'elim, Adonai. Who is like you among the powerful, O God? Now in his final words, Moshe looks up at us and says, who is like you, O Jewish people? You are powerful, finally, among all the powerful. You are blessed and a blessing. In this time of war and heartbreak, may we find a way to hold each other up and see all of our power and all of our blessing. Ashrecha Yisrael, mi chamocha. How fortunate are you, O Jewish people. There is no one like you. Shana Tova.